Hey y'all, it's another beautiful day in the neighborhood. My name is Antonia Faith. The neighborhood is growing. I appreciate each and every one of you. To celebrate, we're going to be talking about cases in your neighborhood. Y'all left comments under my last video telling me about funeral directors from all over the world that were arrested for improperly handling bodies. The two cases we're talking about today have a few things in common, which I thought was kind of interesting to see. If you're into true crime like I am, then you know serial killers usually have a few characteristics that'll let you know early on. If they were out here torturing animals at 6 years old, you'd be like, yeah, we might need to watch him. But what do you look for in dangerous funeral home owners? You know what? Let's just get into it. Our first case is from Lafayette, Georgia. It's about 2 hours north of Atlanta, up near like Chattanooga. Since the 70s, the Tri-State Crematorium handled the cremations for several nearby funeral homes. In 1996, the original owner passed down the business to his 22-year-old son named Brent. In October of 2000, someone called to report that there were bodies scattered all over the funeral home, but the authorities just kind of brushed it off and said that it wasn't a crime, it was like a state board issue. I definitely understand how they could have overlooked it. They were probably thinking like, it's a funeral home, so of course there's bodies inside. But you know, hindsight is 20/20. And if they would have just checked it out this time, they probably could have stopped things from getting as bad as they did. The crematorium sat on about 16 acres of land. In November of 2001, the authorities received another anonymous tip saying that there were bodies in the woods. This time, they actually go to check it out, but they didn't find anything. Then on Valentine's Day of 2002, someone found bones while they were walking their dog. Now, I don't know how they missed it 3 months ago, but this time when police come out, they found the remains of 334 people. It turns out the cremation machine had been broken for a while. During the investigation, families that received ashes from the crematorium sent them in for testing, and guess what they got? Yep, concrete mix. I feel like y'all already knew where I was going with this. They believe some of the bodies had been in the woods for over 10 years, which would have been long before Brent even took over. So maybe he learned it from his daddy. Over 100 of these bodies are so badly decomposed that they'll probably never be identified. Brent was sentenced to 12 years in prison and he'll be on probation for the rest of his life. 5 years after the bodies were discovered, Brent's defense attorney revealed that Brent and his father were actually the victims of mercury poisoning. He says that there wasn't enough ventilation back in the prep room, so when they would cremate a body with dental fillings, the mercury would be released into the air and affect their brains. And that's why they decided to take money for cremations that they knew they couldn't do and to hide the bodies in the woods instead of just fixing their cremation machine. Because that makes sense, right? The families filed a class action lawsuit and settled for $36 million. Now last week we had a fresh retwist. This week, that's not the case. So I was trying to keep this scarf on to the very last second so these edges will lay down. Brent's insurance company agreed to pay the settlement on his behalf, and somehow Brent received a $3.5 million settlement as well. As part of his probation, Brent had to write letters to the families. He was released in June of 2016, and at the time, he said that he just wanted to live a life that was worthy of the community. Our second case is in Flint, Michigan at Swanson Funeral Home. This one is owned by O'Neal Swanson Jr. His father owned 2 funeral homes in the Detroit area and even handled the services for Aretha Franklin. When all this mess went down with his son, O'Neal Swanson Sr. was quick to let it be known that even though these 2 businesses had the same name, they had absolutely nothing to do with each other. He did not want his son messing up his good name. They had several complaints about the smell and the cleanliness and repeated inspection violations dating back to 2012. One family claims that they paid over $4,000 for a funeral. Not only did they deliver the body late, but then they proceeded to add makeup and a wig in front of all their friends and family. How you got me late to my own funeral and I don't even have my wig on yet? In 2015, a family changed their mind about using Swanson Funeral Home to care for their loved one. Mr. Vickers worked at a funeral home across town, so when he went to go pick up the body, he was horrified at what he saw. He took pictures and immediately filed a report saying that 2 bodies had been in the garage for over 5 months. In an interview, he said, "The place just reeked to death. It smelled like decomposition. I'm a country kid and funeral director. I'm used to bad smells. That place was disgusting." The inspector didn't shut down the business, but he did note that there were several bodies in the garage. Swanson replied by saying there wasn't several bodies in his garage, okay? Just 2. Now, did the funeral director learn from this and get his shit together? Of course not. The next year, after another complaint, the inspector returned to find 10 bodies stacked in the garage and the cremains of over 200 people. They said you could literally smell the garage from like 30 feet away. This time, O'Neill said, "We didn't have a bunch of decomposing bodies in our facility when the state came in. They absolutely were not decomposing. They were absolutely unrefrigerated, but they were just waiting for processing." His license was revoked in 2018, and the funeral home was finally closed. In 2020, O'Neill and his wife opened up another funeral home, even though they weren't licensed. This time, when inspectors finally catch wind of it and come out, they find 55 bodies stacked on top of each other. The code enforcement supervisor said there are some things I'll never be able to unsee, ever. Now, if that wasn't enough, the story's about to get crazier. So remember, O'Neill's funeral home had been closed since 2018, right? Trespassers would vandalize the building, spray paint the hearse, and steal the scrap metal. In 2022, 3 people entered through the back to find that a man was crushed underneath a coffin lift in the basement. The man was crushed because he cut a cable while he was trying to steal metal wire, causing the lift to fall on top of him. This time, O'Neill says, "It's unfortunate that this happened, but he had no business being in my building." I can't even lie, y'all. He did a lot of things wrong, but he was right that time. He was right that time. Because you ain't have no business being in there in the first place. When this happened, O'Neill also told reporters that he had plans to rehabilitate and reopen the funeral home. And I'm gonna have to stop you right there. You traumatized us enough. No, thank you. I'm not sure if he'll be able to renovate the building anyway because there was a fire about 3 weeks ago. All the bad luck that's happening there, I think at this point it's best if we just go ahead and leave it alone. Somebody asked if this happens in Black funeral homes, and it absolutely does. Both of these cases were Black funeral directors. I don't want to come off like I'm bashing the entire funeral industry because there are plenty of funeral directors that still have integrity and got into the business for the right reasons. O'Neill's father said that the actions he was accused of go against every principle of mortuary science. Mr. Vickers, the funeral director that reported O'Neill, said in an interview, no matter how someone passed, no matter what their financial situation was like, they're someone and should be treated with dignity. Another thing the funeral directors have in common is that they both come from families in the funeral business. It can be hard for someone like me to break into the industry because I don't have any family working in death care. By keeping the industry closed, they can keep their secrets hidden. But it's 2024 and this is the year of truth, so let's tell the truth about funerals. I'm not victim blaming at all, but families that are affected by these type of cases rarely speak out or make reports because of the feelings of guilt and embarrassment. Let me say this, trusting a licensed professional to treat the deceased with dignity and allowing families to grieve without traumatizing or exploiting them is nothing to be ashamed of. Death is just as natural and should be handled just as carefully as birth. It can be really hard to talk about death because of the fear of the unknown, but one thing we do know is that we're all gonna do it at some point. My goal is to normalize death positivity and to have more open conversations so we can change the way we leave the earth, because this doesn't make sense. Thank you for having a drink with me tonight. Be safe out there, and I'll see y'all next time.